Be sure to check out MythVisionPodcast.com. Help MythVision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all of my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can donate also through PayPal. Join our social media links down in the description. We have Twitter and Facebook groups. Help the community of MythVision grow. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell button so you're notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Like this video and comment your thoughts below because I want to know what you think about all of these things.
We are MythVision. Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. Your host, Derek Lambert, the secret name of God. And this is the topic today, something that you got to get your coffee in you to try and keep up a little bit with this. But Samuel Zinner, is joining us today. Samuel, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I'm doing good too. I have a buddy of mine who does Gematria, and he likes to get into the numerical significance of letters and names and things like that. And this is kind of in the same vein in a sense. We're going to be getting into some of that. But at first, you wanted to bring up a topic of a movie, and I think that movie and the topic is funny and interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, if you wouldn't just start us out.
Your listeners know that the director, Darren Aronofsky, but his movie Pi, he directed the recent Noah movie. So
you said pi, P-I-E?
Yes, this is Pi, as in the mathematical pi. In Greek, it's pronounced P, right? But pi. So the mathematical pi.
Okay.
Right. So this is the name of the movie, directed by Darren Aronofsky. It's sort of like a film noir, right? It's black and white. It's a really hip movie that stars this character named Max, who's a geek, computer programmer. I don't know, maybe he's 30 years old or so. And he's an agnostic, if not an atheist, but from a Jewish background. And it turns out that his computer runs this problem and spits out this long sequence of numbers, beginning with pi, of course. And this group of Hasidic, long-bearded Hasidic Jews believe that this is like the numerical value, the secret name of God that's needed, that they need in order to do a secret ritual to bring the Messiah, right? So they start befriending Max. Max has no idea why, right? Because they want to get this numerical sequence, the page that's printed out, right? So there's this famous scene, and you can see the clip, right, on YouTube. And this Hasidic Jew, probably about the same age as Max, comes into a coffee shop where Max is sitting, enjoying his coffee, cigarette. And as the camera focuses in on the twirling milk, right, going into the coffee and the smoke rising, this Hasidic Jew sits down and looks at Max and says, "Oh, hi." They introduce each other, and the Hasidic Jew asks Max, "What do you do for a living?" "Well, I work with numbers. I'm a computer programmer." And the Hasidic Jew says, "Really? That's what I do too." Says, "Oh, you're a computer programmer?" "No, I work with the Torah." So the Torah is just a long string of numbers, right? And it goes from there. Anyway, it's a really good movie. Everyone should take a look at it.
So what are some of the things that they did when writing some of these books? I'm sure they hid some things in there that were, I mean, it's not like it's overly complicated to figure out that they're there, but all you have to do is count, because each letter has a number, and we're not going to go into the basics. If you aren't aware of it, it's an alphanumeric alphabet. The alphabet is numerically valued, just like Roman numerals. There's numbers and alphabet in the same, it's built into the same structure, if you will, if I'm not mistaken. So take us into some of this stuff. What are some of the things you've figured out?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't go so far as the Hasidic Jew in that movie, right? And say, well, it's just, it's just like this matrix of green glowing numbers, right, flowing down. No, but it just as a scholar, right, I can point out that there are numerical structures, right, that are ancient Hebrew scribal techniques. Right, so numerical structures were used just like all poetry, especially modern poetry, has structure to it, except of course, blank verse, free verse, modern free verse, but even older blank verse, right? It does have structure still. But in any case, there's always some kind of structure to poetry, especially poetry. But in the Tanakh, there are numerical structures, not only in the poetic pieces, let's just say the book of Tehillim or the book of Psalms, right? But also in prose sections. There are also numerical techniques that are used by the scribes to give structure, literary structure, to the text. But not only literary structure, but I'll explain some of the other reasons I think that these numerical techniques were used by these ancient scribes and composers, right? Because when you talk about you talk about the composer of Psalm 23, whoever that was. Traditionally, it's David, but so the composer has composed the prayer or the psalm based and given it a structure, right? That comes from numbers, right? The easiest way I think I can point this out is if you go to Psalm 1, the very first psalm, right? It's short, 6 verses. You will notice, right, that towards the beginning of Psalm 1, there's one instance of the Tetragrammaton. The Tetragrammaton is the 4-letter name of God, which traditional Jews do not pronounce. So I will refer to it as the Tetragrammaton, or I'll just say the letters that form it, which are Yod He Vav He. Right? So you will notice that towards the beginning, in the earlier part of Psalm 1, there's one instance of the Tetragrammaton. And then towards the end, right, in verse 6, the final verse, there's another instance of the Tetragrammaton. Right? And keep in mind, the first letter of the Tetragrammaton in Hebrew is called Yod, and it Yod He Vav He, the 4 letters. If you add up the numerical values of each of those letters, you will get 26. So 26 is a very central number in Jewish tradition, especially in Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, right? Because it's the numerical value of the proper name of God, right? Now, there's a substitute for the Tetragrammaton, which is not only Hashem, which a lot of people will have heard, but Adonai. Right? So Adonai has a numerical value of 65. All right, so that's all you need to know. The Tetragrammaton equals 26. The substitute for it is Adonai, and that's 65. All right. If you open your Hebrew Bible to Psalm 1, start counting the letters. Right? Start counting the letters, and you will find that when you get to 65, the 65th letter, what is it? Lo and behold, it's the Yod of Yod He Vav He. Right? Now, if you go to the end of Psalm 1, where you have the verse 6, where you have the second and final instance of Yod He Vav He, if you pinpoint the Yod there in verse 6 of the Tetragrammaton and start with 1, and count until you get to the end of the psalm, and you will see that Yod is 26 letters to the end of Psalm 1. Right? So what's happening there is in verse 6, the 26 letters, right, from the first letter of the Tetragrammaton to the end of the psalm is a hint at the numerical value of Yod He Vav He. Now, the first instance of Yod He Vav He, right, the Yod, the first letter is letter 65. Now, that's hinting at the numerical value of the Tetragrammaton substitute, Adonai, right? So why can you put Yod He Vav He place it according to the numerical value, not of Yod He Vav He, but of Adonai? Because, of course, in Jewish thought, right, Adonai is the same as Yod He Vav He. The Lord is Adonai. The Lord is God. God Elohim, as the numerical value is 86. So in the Psalms, you can often find the Tetragrammaton as letter 86, for instance. And so you can interchange them that way.
All you do is add them together.
Right. You can interchange them. So the question then becomes, all right, that's interesting, but why? Right. Well, so what that first of all tells you is that the divine names are never placed at random in the Hebrew text. Wherever they are, they're placed according to some numerical consideration. But this is where the scribal techniques come into play. And of course, back then, the scribes were the only ones who would have known the numerical values of these names. So the average person reading or just hearing this or saying this would hear the name of God when it was said explicitly, but they would be totally oblivious to the hidden hint, right, at the names of God, at the numerical values of these same names of God. So it's like an explicit and a hidden usage, right, of these names. And if you put yourself back into an ancient way of thinking, I think that it's a good bet, right? That what's going on there is a belief that just as when you say the names of God, they release the power of those names.
Right.
Even when you read a text, right, that's structured according to the names of God, this is also, it's like a double portion, right, of the spiritual potencies of these names. Right, and it can be done not only according to what could be called word placement. All right, place Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh as letter 26, starting with the letter 26, or let's say it's word 26. It can also be worked this way. Psalm 23, right? The Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. Everyone knows this, right? I know I heard it once in an X-Files episode at a funeral. All right, so if you look at the Hebrew of that, you will see that the central statement in there is 3 words in Hebrew, but in English it would be where it says, "For thou art with me." But you will see that there are exactly 26 Hebrew words that precede that statement, and there are exactly 26 words that follow that statement. So it's 26 words plus 3 plus 26 words. Now, in each block of 26 words, there is one instance of the Tetragrammaton. The numerical value is 26. So obviously, this Psalm 23, very famous psalm, has been structured intentionally to hint at the 2 explicit instances of the Tetragrammaton. But but there are hidden. There are 2 hidden hints at the numerical value at the Tetragrammaton via this numerical technique, this numerical scribal technique, right? So you get the spiritual potency from the explicit names of God that are said, right, when it's recited. But then according to the scribal way of thinking is you're also getting another wave of this potency of these divine names by virtue of this secret embedding, right, secret hints at the numerical values of these names. I'll give you one more example, and this would suffice. It's Psalm 110, another really famous one. And it gave rise to a lot of controversy, right, between early Christians and rabbinic authorities. It's just like in English, it's known as, it starts out, "The Lord said to my Lord." Right? And in Hebrew, this Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, right, said to Adonai, which is a human king. Right, the divine name Adonai is pointed differently, it has different diacritical marks to be pronounced differently. So it's God. So the Lord says to my Lord. So Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh says to my Adonai. And then the divine name Adonai occurs in a later verse, right? But the word Adonai is it's central to that psalm. And if you count the numbers in Hebrew, it's of course, the numerical value of Adonai is 65. Well, Psalm 110, which is all about Adonai, and it gave rise to a lot of controversy over the interpretation of that name of Adonai and Adonai. Right? It has 65 words in that text, exactly 65 words, right, in that text. So that's another example of how this psalm has been crafted, right? So that its hidden numerical structure is hinting at, right, this explicitly invoked name of God, Adonai.
Does this work? Does this work with both the Septuagint as well as the Hebrew?
Yes, because this was an ancient scribal technique. The Septuagint mimicked they were aware. Now, scholars have not really looked into this. I've looked into it extensively. And you will see, for instance, right, if you go to the Septuagint and Psalm 1, right, Greek is wordier. It's more lengthy than Hebrew, right? So there are many more words. There's 67 words in the Hebrew text of Psalm 1. Well, I think it's 110 Greek words in the Septuagint. It's really not the Septuagint, it's the Old Greek. The Septuagint is really just the Pentateuch or the Torah translated into Greek. But in any case, the Greek version, the Greek translation of Psalm 1 mimics what the Hebrew text does. But it has to do it in different ways because, as I say, Greek is wordier, so you can't get, right? So the Tetragrammaton in the Greek is expressed with kurios, the Greek word for Lord, which would also correspond to Adonai. But how do they imitate or mimic these techniques? Well, the first kurios in Greek, Psalm 1 is, let you guess, what word is it? It's word 26. Right? And I could go on and give you many examples of how the Greek, clearly the Greek scribes who were translating this from the Hebrew were scribes, and they were trained in the same scribal techniques that the scribes were trained in, who were responsible for, the manuscripts of the Tanakh. So it's an ancient scribal technique, and I could give you, unending, a plethora of examples. Right? This also works in the Septuagint. So I've never argued, well, yeah, but this is what I've told you about the Hebrew text of Psalm 1. So this is proof that this text is divinely inspired.
That's
not my argument is that this is an overlooked ancient scribal technique. That has to do with a concern with the numerical values of the names of God. So there's a spiritual belief that's inherent in why this scribal technique was used, but it's also a literary technique.
I agree. I think that Genesis 1 does something strange as well, from what I understand, with numbers and such.
Yes, it's all throughout the Tanakh. You can find textual structuring, by using units of, word counts. There are 86 words in this hymn about Elohim. Well, there you go. But this is ubiquitous throughout the Tanakh. But it gets really, really complicated. And of course, sometimes you do have to be rigorous. And in some instances, you have to say, well, it's probably coincidence. Some of the numerical patterns just may be coincidence, because life is full of randomness, right? But the examples that I gave you, like in Psalm 1, are pretty clear cut, especially when you continue that on to Psalm 2, and then you realize word 26 of Psalm 2 is what? Adonai. So just as the first Yod He Vah He in Psalm 1 is placed according to the numerical value of Adonai, the first Adonai in Psalm 2 is placed according to the numerical value of Yod He Vah He. So it's sort of like a chiasm, right? And then you go to the last Yod He Vah He in Psalm 2. Lo and behold, the Yod is 65 letters to the end of Psalm 2. So the same interchange between Yod He Vah He and Adonai. Right? And you find something very similar in the Greek translation of Psalm 2 as well. So, but anyway, there are things that just may be coincidence, but some of them are pretty, make you think twice. For instance, I'll give you just one example, and that is the opening line of the Torah, right? Bereshit bara, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. All right. Elohim, right? God, numerical value 86. All right. Now, if you look at that, identify all the alephs, all instances of the letter aleph, which is the first letter of Elohim, right? And so let's say Bereshit, so, right? So you just have to make a list all right, and I don't have this memorized, right? But once you say, all right, let's say letter 10 is an aleph, letter 15 is an aleph. So you write 10 and 15. But anyway, go through that first verse, right? And find out and make a list of each aleph. And then you add the numbers up and you will come up with 86. Right? So is it a coincidence? It may be, but it's really, makes you think twice. But look, a lot of these ancient scribes, what else did they have to do? They had a lot of time on their hands. So these texts could have been crafted, really meticulously. A lot of thought would have went into them, right? So I would not be surprised to find out that they did that on purpose, right? To make all the alephs add up, right, to 86. Because this is the first time Elohim is mentioned in the Torah, right?
So my final question on this topic, because this is a very thorough, it takes looking and visually getting involved.
Before you get there, if I may, I'll point out, right, that hand in hand with this are the letter techniques, acrostics and acronyms, right? But in Psalm 1, right, if you start with the last verse of Psalm 1, right, you will find that there is actually you read the last verse of Psalm 1 and continue reading the next three verses, the first three verses of Psalm 2, and you will find there's a Yod He Vav He acrostic. For some reason, it's been overlooked, but there it is. So there are, the things going on with the numerical structure of divine names, which I told you about, but then there's an actual acrostic of the divine name Yod He Vav He that joins the ending of Psalm 1 to the first part of Psalm 2. So,
is there anything like this in the New Testament? That's my only question. Literally, I just think it's fascinating.
Yes, it's an ancient scribal technique. And for instance, Greek scribes who didn't know any Hebrew, they wouldn't have to know Hebrew to do stuff like this. All they would have to have is a piece of paper that told them, that listed to them the numerical values of the different Hebrew names of God. That's all they would have needed. And then they could structure it accordingly. But there's an abundance of evidence for this. It's an ancient scribal technique. You'll find it in the New Testament as well.
Okay. Maybe we can link something. Do you have anything written on this in your academia?
1,000 pages. You'll find it in early Christian literature, for instance, in the Didache. Are you familiar with the Didache document?
Yeah.
Yes. There are a number of prayers in there that a lot of scholars say these are like Jewish Christian prayers. Like the Eucharistic prayers are not Pauline. They don't have a Pauline theology of the Eucharist. They have a more Jewish approach, a more Jewish Christian flavor and ideas inherent in them. But if you count, there are a number of prayers in the Didache. But for instance, there are two of them. One of them you'll find that it's composed of exactly 26 words. Another of them you'll find is composed of exactly 86. So that's Yod He Vav He and Elohim, respectively. And you can take them apart. You can say, there's 86 words in this, and then you start counting, and you'll find out, Kyrios is word 65 in that. So it's like layer upon balut, and then you count the letters, and you find, wow, the first Kyrios, the first letter is letter 65, right? So. There's not very much knowledge about this, because who in the world but people like me will take the time to actually count letters? Of course, this becomes easier in the computer age, right?
Yeah.
But not too easy. You can do this with Greek, but it's really hard to do it in Hebrew and things like that, because of the way computer systems are set up. Like the diacritical marks and all this will give you an error in the letter counts, right? So basically, I've done most of my research just with a pencil, right? And looking at the text and counting things off and then trying to confirm it right? And make sure you counted correctly and all of that, and getting other people to count it too, to make sure you got it right. But yeah, I put together like 1,000 pages of notes on this from the Tanakh and early Christian literature. And so I'm convinced this is an ancient scribal technique, right? That was continued in the early Jesus movement. And I really haven't found much of this, like in, let's say, Paul's letters, like when people wrote letters,
Right.
they weren't doing this,
It probably wasn't even.
That's what I was going to
say.
When it came to writing prayers or parables or teachings, they put a lot of thought into it, into the structure. And often you will find that there's hints at the numerical values of the divine names in Hebrew, not in Greek. In Greek texts, but they're the Hebrew values that are being used.
Interesting. Samuel Zinner.
I'll give you one final example that answers your question, right?
Okay.
This one is known in Hebrew Exodus 3, where God's telling Moses, you got to go to the nation of Israel, tell them I sent you. He said, well, what's your name? Because they're going to ask me, well, who sent you? How do we know who you are? And I believe it's where Moses asks, who is it that sent you? Right? In that phrase, who is it that sent you? If you isolate in every word, the final letter of each of those 4 words in Hebrew, it is Yod He Vav He. So it says, if in the answer and in the question, in the open question is a hidden answer. Who they will ask me, who is it that sent you? Right? So there's an acronym hidden in there. Well, Yod He Vav He. But what's interesting about that is it works in the Greek Septuagint there. If you do the same thing in the Greek Septuagint, you will see the famous Greek 3-letter version of the Tetragrammaton, right? Which is Iota, Alpha, Omega, right? And it's in the same acronym is there in Greek as it is in Hebrew. So this is another example of how these scribes were aware of what was going on in the Hebrew, and they mimicked it when the structure of the Greek translation would permit it.
Wow.
All right.
Interesting. Everybody go down in the description and check out his links for sure, academia.edu. And you are full of information. There's so many topics we're going to be talking about. Right now, you guys don't see his face because he is on Mars, and we can't get MP4 from Mars right now. He just had an earthquake on Mars or something. We're trying to keep the internet stable enough to make this happen. Where are you at again?
I'm in
Costa Blanca. So hopefully he gets somewhere where the internet speeds up at some point and we can do really good visuals. But I really do appreciate you joining me again and just sharing this wealth of information.
Yeah, my pleasure. Anytime.
And everybody, we are MythVision.